Hi, everybody. Good to see you. And you're more than welcome. We're so small to unmute if you want to. It's up to you. Where we can have a little give and take would be perfectly fine. It might make it easier. So whatever you're comfortable with, I'm comfortable with you unmuting. We're small. And my dog is asleep, so we should be fine on my end. Unless he wakes up. It's great to see everybody. I know some of you, and I don't know everybody. Maybe just really quickly go around and say who you are, you know, what church you're with, pastor, layperson, whatever. So I'll just have at it. Just say who you are.
Hi, I'm Bruce. I'm the pastor at OEM First Presbyterian.
Great, Bruce. Good to see you.
Bruce. I'll go next. I'm Lisa Giacomazza. I am a commissioned ruling elder pastor at Bacon Memorial Presbyterian in Niagara Falls.
Welcome, Lisa. I know you too.
Yes.
Laura Glista, I'm an elder at Wayside Presbyterian Church in Hamburg.
Great. Welcome, Laura. Good to see you. I know your church well too. I moderated for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah, Monica.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I am Monica Barner. I'm an elder and serving Youngstown Presbyterian as their director of children and youth ministries. And Laura and I are going like this, like we need to get a youth trip to the UN or DC, because I'm also the chair of the DNRT committee of the Presbytery too.
Oh, that's really great. Very good. Even though I'm gone from East Aurora, I recommend that they need a little push sometimes to get involved. And so if you think about it, East Aurora the First Pres Church would be great to contact. And
Who's their person, buddy? I'll reach out to them.
Yeah, it's Natalie Hernandez is working with the youth as a volunteer.
Okay.
But the Christian education director is oh gosh, my mind just totally blanked. Who am I thinking of? Yeah, this is terrible. Annie Clark. I've been gone 2 months. I forgot everybody. Yeah, that'd be great. Welcome, Monica. And Micah.
Hi, I'm Micah. I resigned this time last year from my pastoral position at Lafayette Avenue Presbyterian Church. Currently serving in the Presbytery in a variety of roles, and director of youth ministries at Westminster Presbyterian Church.
That's great. Welcome, Mike. I know you too, so it's good to see you. Although we haven't really had a chance to sit down yet, but I know we will.
Yes.
So, good. Well, welcome everybody. Yeah, Mike and I share the love for playing guitar and singing. I know that, and leading music. It's good. It's good to be with you. It's funny. I just got over COVID and had a lot of COVID foggy brain, and I contacted Debbie last week. It was around Wednesday. I said, I'm not going to be able to do the seminar because I've lost my voice. And she said, well, maybe by next week you'll be okay. And I thought, isn't it this Saturday? And meaning last Saturday. And she said, no. I said, oh, I'm so foggy. I said, I should be okay. Well, I'm mostly okay. But I literally had zero voice for about 8 days. And so anyway, I'm back and I've got my water to keep me going here. But, you know, I was the pastor 20 years in East Aurora at the First Presbyterian. Before that, I was the interim pastor at Niagara Falls for First Presbyterian for 3 years. And before that, I was, about 16 months at First Presbyterian Church in Buffalo, which is my disaster ministry, in my disaster service ministry in my 40 years of ministry. It was a really rough, tough time, and I resigned very soon after being there. But that's just some of my background. So I've been around for 27 or whatever years now. And what leads me to leading this, why Debbie asked me, and Lisa knows too, because Lisa was in the Lake Academy class that I led, a course that I did. Very quickly, because I don't want to take up too much time. Part of my background and why spiritual practices became really important was I always prayed and always actually started journaling right at the beginning of seminary, which was 1980 or 78, I think it was when I started journaling. and in my prayers and sporadically. But it was early in my ministry, when I was a young minister, I was around 30, that I thought I was having a heart attack. The stress of ministry and everything was getting to me, and my heart was going crazy. And I went to a doctor and they did an EKG, and he said, well, your heart is totally fine. He says, I don't think you're handling stress very well, though. And he said, let me give you a prescription, whatever it was back then, to help calm you. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. I got to find a better way. Maybe I could use that. Maybe it would be helpful, but I need to find a different path. And so I found a book called Mending the Bond. I always get tongue tied on this one. It's Joan Borisenko. And I think probably Lisa, you may remember I mentioned this book, but it was Minding the Body, Mending the Mind. Minding the Body, Mending the Mind. And it was written by Joan Borisenko, who was a doctor, a physician, but had also experienced the stress of thinking she was going to fall apart and have a nervous breakdown, have a heart attack. And her medical research went then into looking at mind-body connections. And that led her into looking at relaxation, but also meditation. And this book was a lifesaver for me. It really totally changed my life. The Bible was important, but she really helped me to learn the importance of spiritual practices as a way of not only of connecting with God, but managing life also. It really transformed me. Well, it led a few years later then to going to the Schlem Institute in Bethesda, Maryland, in their spiritual formation program, spiritual guidance, to become a spiritual director. There are a lot of Catholic spiritual directors out there, a lot of nuns, and I've been seeing a nun locally in Buffalo for 25 years or so. But they're not as many Protestant, but I became one of those Protestant spiritual directors. And so that was kind of a big piece of my life for the last, probably 22 years or so. And it also led to my doing my doctorate of ministry at Louisville Seminary in spiritual practices. And so I've written a lot. I've written a couple books on spiritual practices, unpublished. Maybe in retirement I'll get them published. I'm happy. My email address, I'll give that to you too, it's just Pastor Buddy 1. That's pretty easy. Pastor Buddy 1 is the number 1 at AOL.com. And if you're interested at all, I can send you some the books I've done. I've got one completely finished on prayer, and one I'm still in process of writing on spiritual practices. And I'd be glad to send those to you for you to just peruse and see if they're helpful in any way. I'll send you my dissertation if you want that too. It's a digital file. Anything you want, let me know. So that's my background. And I've got as I mentioned with Jimmy, I've got a deep passion for justice, but also a deep passion for spirituality. And for me, the two are not distinguished. It's really part and parcel of the same thing. So let me just stop there. That's the background. And find out, why did you decide you wanted to come to this particular workshop today? I think it'd be helpful to know what is it that intrigues you, inspires you, or you've got questions about.
I'll go first on that.
Sure.
I'm no longer pastoring, as I mentioned, at the moment. I guess I'm propelling forward my hopes in future ministry to be able to be a bit more sustainable. So that was one of the words that caught my eye, Reverend Buddy, with your presentation today. I feel like if there's an area that I need to improve, it's being able to think a little bit more long term, rather than, coming into congregations, a little bit faster, particularly in areas, in my case, of social justice, as you just mentioned, connected with spiritual practice. I very much see it that way as well. And it's a personal thing for me, as well as a vision I have for the church. So, just being able to have a little bit more of a longer vision when moving forward in pastoral ministry is one of the things that interests me in my own development.
That's good. Thanks, Micah. Anybody else?
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to kind of enhance what I'm doing and see if there were new ideas. It seemed, well, not necessarily new ideas, but new to me ideas to put into practice.
Good. Good. Thanks, Bruce. In a moment after everybody who wants to say something, I'm going to ask, so what are your practices? What are the things that kind of nurture you? But we'll wait for that just a second, find out why you're here. Monica, you were going to say something.
I am taking classes through Union Seminary, and we just finished a class on spiritual direction. I loved it. I really loved it. And I look at nurturing others. First, I did it with my own children, right? Like kind of co-parent, looked at parenting as a spiritual practice. Now I'm looking at the way I serve this church as a spirit of taking care of others as a spiritual practice. I just went through the whole heart thing. I know exactly what I just had a whole EKG, just the whole workup. So I really need to, put my own oxygen mask on first. I want to learn how to do that. So thank you.
Oh, good. Thanks, Monica. Anybody else?
I'll go. It's Lisa. First of all, I will always sign up for a buddy-led spiritual class of any kind, an hour a week, a month. And I recommend you do the same if he ever does that class again, because for me, it was life-changing. And God is great. Can I get an amen? Because I took that course when I first took my very first pastor job, and I worked full-time also at a hospital. So to EKG, I wouldn't have wanted them to put an EKG on me at that point. So it taught me so much about, I personally think that as faith leaders, we cannot lead unless we have a deep faith ourselves, a deep spiritual practice ourselves. But he taught me that. And I believe that we lead by example in that regard. So, we are always like quick to come up with these practices and committees and all the things that we want to do within our churches, and they're busy, but there has to be a moment. And so what I know we're going to talk about this next, but this was something that kind of evolved out of my class. We always started every class with a meditation. And I thought, why don't I start every church service with a meditation? We walk into church and we're like, are you coming to the meeting after church? And you go, did you do the coffee hour? And and our heads are like going like this. And then we're also thinking about, what are we having for dinner, and the grocery list, and gardening. So I intentionally set aside time in the beginning of the service now where we meditate and we take deep breaths. And this was all inspired by a buddy. So I thank you, sir, so much for changing how I am as pastor, changing how I am, honestly, as a spiritual being, and really, truly understanding what it means to put it into practice. And his prayer book, by the way, is fantastic. I use it for my session meetings. I plagiarized you so much.
It's okay.
It is great. Please send him an email and get it if you don't have it, and I'm going to get another copy myself, because it is awesome. He takes you right through this wonderful journey in this book, and it's fantastic. So I'm excited, and I'm so glad you're retired and enjoying. I'm sorry you had COVID, but you look great anyways, and I love following you on Facebook with your family. So
Thanks.
that's all I'm going to say.
Thanks.
Thank
That's
you.
great. That's encouraging. Good to know. Thank you. Laura, did you want to share anything about, or you don't have to?
Sure. First of all, I was going to be in the workshop for art and spirituality. And, but sometimes things happen for a reason. I taught art for 44 years. So sometimes you need to put yourself in a place where there's a greater need in your life. And I think I'm in a good place for today. Also, our church has certainly gone through a number of years now with in and out of interims and pastors and just pulpit supply. And so now that I'm back on session again, I'm thinking there will be things that I can take back and hopefully, reestablish some of the diversity that we have in our congregation right now. So I'm glad to be here and glad to have known you in other capacities as well.
Well, thank you, Laura. Thanks so much. Well, I want to do this. I'm going to share my screen hopefully, let's see if they get up and running. I think they did. Yeah. Let me just find, hopefully, just a few things I've written. Let's just see if this is the one I wanted. I think they're in order. Yeah, this is good. Everybody can see it, right? Okay, I've just pulled out a few things I've written in different places that just as a beginning, and I'll just read this little really quickie. Christian faith is more than a belief. It's an embodied faith lived in real flesh and blood through definite, specific practices that enable one to open to God's loving presence and grow in the Christian faith. These spiritual practices include prayer, Sabbath keeping, scripture reading, giving, care for the poor, hospitality, and a host of others, all of which have been present among Christian people and Jewish people before, since the beginning of the faith. I'd have to add Muslim people afterwards as well. Throughout the many eras of Christian faith, these practices have been spoken of in a variety of ways. Disciplines, Richard Foster; exercises, Ignatius and Jeremy Taylor; habits, Robert Bella; acts of devotion, Acts 2:42; rules, Benedict; techniques, Michael Foucault; and methods, John Wesley, thus the Methodists. The language has changed with the times, but the concept is the same. The Christian faith is a lived faith, a faith we practice. There's never been a time in the Christian church, or in Judaism for that matter, that spiritual practices were not a centerpiece in the growth of faith. And so I share that because it's interesting, the language evolves constantly. There was a time when early in my spiritual practice growth period, the word was discipline, but then that really kind of fell out. I mean, people got like, discipline, that's so negative. And now it's pretty much practices. I don't know what it'll be tomorrow, but I just wanted to see historically, the word keeps changing in order for people to be a little bit more enticed according to the culture of the time, right? But it's the same thing. And I want you to think in terms of spiritual practices, in terms of anything in life you seek to grow in, get better at, improve. So look at Micah playing the guitar. You didn't start learning guitar chords and suddenly you had it all down. You probably, as I remember starting, oh man, it was C, G, and D over and over and over again, 3 chords that just until I could get them seamlessly and then add a few more, etc. Right? I'm a runner. I started running 45, like 1 mile, and I got it up to like 3, and I thought, man, this is killing me. But then I wanted to run a marathon. Well, guess what? You add a little bit more. You practice. I did my run this morning before this. Got to keep practicing to get better. It's true about everything in life. And one thing I really appreciated was when Laura mentioned art, and Monica, you mentioned parenting. It's really funny. I've written so much on spiritual practices, but I have a feeling I haven't written on those 2 aspects, and yet those are really great. I'm going to show you in a moment a list of a lot of spiritual practices I've come up with and I'm writing on. But yeah, isn't it true that so many of the aspects of our lives intersect with our spiritual life, because foundationally we are spiritual beings. And I used to, in my sermons with my families, I used to push every year, usually in September, when they all came for the first, after Labor Day, it was like, I got them to say to them, hey, and I've been a bad pastor sometimes. And I've said sometimes, if you work on your children's physical well-being and their educational well-being and their social well-being and their musical and arts well-being, but you neglect their spiritual well-being, you're a failure as a parent. And to which they'd all go, what? And I would say, what I'm trying to get at is that we are, as Joan Borysenko said, whole beings. And we are whole beings in not just mind and body, but socially in so many pieces. And I love the Jewish conceptions of being better than the Greek conception. The Greek idea is Plato, is that we're mind, body, spirit. Basically, we're tripartite. We're 3 parts. But the Jewish concept really is that we are one whole. that the body and the soul, the spirit, everything is just one, and there's no division between them. And so one of the things in spiritual practice, I think, is to really begin looking at your life as a whole. And so your work is spiritual practice. You know, your avocation, spiritual practice, even eating is spiritual practice. It's all spiritual practice because it's all connected to our being in God. And now for Christians, an important word for that is intentionality. It's to be intentional about what we do. None of that happens without being intentional of the integration of our lives. And so let me just share another little screen here. Let's see if I can find it. Here we go. And we're going to come back to you so you can share some things in a second here. Let's see if this is the, I'm trying to find, I think this is the one I'm looking for. Everything is so small, you can't read this thing, you know, until I get it on the screen. Yeah, so I just share here that we begin with the biblical witness to an embodied practical faith. In the 10 commandments given to Moses, the people of faith are called to practice Sabbath keeping. Joshua reminds the people to keep the Torah ever present in their minds, meditating on it night and day. The prophet Micah, calls the faithful to do justice, love kindness, to walk humbly with your God, all actions of practicing the faith. Jesus, while warning of the wrong uses of spiritual practices, nonetheless acknowledges the legitimacy of such practices as Sabbath keeping, almsgiving, and prayer, and actively demonstrates his own practice of prayer by waking early and going to a deserted place to pray, as well as praying in the Garden of Gethsemane on the night of his arrest. The Apostle Paul regularly called for the observance of spiritual practices such as prayer, giving, and hospitality. And Christians were known early as the way, an indication that they were known for their practice of the faith. And by the way, in many ways, you know, Buddhism is really is not a religion; it's a way, it's a practice of, and really a spiritual practice. Brian McLaren suggests we have forgotten this in his book "Finding Our Way Again: The Return of the Ancient Practices," which I highly recommend. He tells the story of a conversation with Peter Senge, in which Senge reported that he had discovered from a bookstore owner that books on Buddhism sold better than books on Christianity. When Senge inquired why, the owner replied that it is because people see Buddhism as a way of life, but Christianity as a system of beliefs. People aren't looking for the latter. They're hungry for a way of life, which Christianity is, but too few people understand. And so, let's see if I can find my, here we go. Let me stop sharing that. And so, you know, woven through life is a practice, a spiritual practice. Unfortunately, there are some who've warned of the dangers of spiritual practice, who've said it's just become another, a fad or a works righteousness, you know, do these things and then now I'm a good Christian. We know that, you know, how many times have people we've heard in church say, so what's a Christian? Oh, it's a good person or a person who goes to church. Well, no, it's a person who has a relationship with God and within a faith community who practices the faith in order to grow more deeply in that faith and in their relationship with God, right? And so it's kind of foundational biblically, historically to us. But how about you right now? What has been nurturing what are the practices that you find nurturing to you? And whenever you ask this question, there can often be really wide and diverse answers to that. You know, and I'm not going to say what's important to me right now, but what about you? If you want to share, you don't have to. What are the things, you know, not too many, but 2 or 3 if you want, that really nurture your relationship with God? Yeah, Laura.
Since I retired, I became a docent at the Birchville Penny Art Museum. And so it certainly is, you know, I wanted to be an ongoing learner about art, but there are such diverse artists that we represent in our exhibitions. So it's been amazing to look at some of these cultures and ethnic backgrounds, what the artist has tried to say in their artwork. and what it means to the people who are viewing it, and then to give tours to children or other adults as to what that can mean to them in their lives, and awareness and understanding. It's been really rewarding, I think, to see some of that, because all my life I've lived out in Lakeview, south of Hamburg, in a very homogenous kind of a neighborhood and background. I also, when I was teaching, I tried to bring a lot of that into my art studio, taking kids on field trips to New York City to see other diverse backgrounds that they weren't aware of, so they didn't think it looked like Hamburg, New York the rest of their life. And also active in the Character Council in my school, but then recently we did a collaborative mural at the Birchfield with 600 kids doing little tiny tiles and putting it all together to show the character virtues in that way. So it's like you can't necessarily go out and preach your religion as such in a public school or in an art gallery, but through that intentional sharing of your values. So that's my take on it.
That's great. Well, and it's engaging you in a deeply, community is deeply spiritual. It always is. Anytime we build community, God is in the middle of that, because I just think that God is love and community is love, right? And so that work, one thing I'm getting at, I hope you see too, is we need to rethink the things we do in spiritual ways. There was Wes Pippert, who used to be a UPI way back in the day, Washington correspondent. I remember an article he wrote. He says, we need to think of everything we do theologically. And for him, he says, I am a journalist. And so what is my theological purpose, my spiritual purpose? He says, it's truth. And he says, and it changes everything when we begin to see who we are in that spiritual way. And it informs us that what we do is often very much spiritual practice. So that's a great example. So how about somebody else? Yeah, Monica.
I don't know about everyone else, but the pandemic really put a damper on my spiritual practice. I found out I'm very connected, very addicted to my phone, very much information type thing. So I'm just slowly now starting to intentionally bring back very, very small ways. And it has to do with coffee in the morning, the way it feels in my hand. And right now I'm just listening, just emptying my mind and listening. And I'm trying to incorporate a daily walk with 3 things I am grateful to God for. And I share those with my girls.
That's neat. That's really good. I think one of the things you illustrate is important. Solitude and space are really necessary, right? And a letting go. All those are spiritual practices. Everything you're describing, very much so, and very renewing as you're experiencing. That's very good. Somebody else? Anybody else?
For me, guitar and journaling were always my go-to spiritual practices for quite a while. But once again, the effect of the pandemic for me was to focus on my health a bit and really incorporating some health practices that I began seeing in that sacramental theology way that you kind of referenced, Reverend Buddy, just that, every part of our day is sacred, and that, taking the time to cut up vegetables versus grabbing fast food is a way that I'm, practicing my spirituality as well as caring for my body. And exercise, Monica, that was something that's important to me too, taking a walk, and just kind of getting to know my neighborhood in that spatial sense as someone who recently moved here. So those have all been important for me right now.
That's really good. Yeah. Me, guitar. I remember when I first started playing, I sat on a rock in the middle of a stream is where I learned to play the guitar. I had to hop over to get to the rock, and a few rocks over, and then I got on it and I just sit there for hours, and it's music, in other words, is very spiritual. The other thing that's interesting, you illustrate too, I think, with the food part, is I always think of Brother Lawrence and his book, The Practice of the Presence of God. And his whole thing was the spirituality of pots and pans. And you know, his job in the monastery was washing dishes, and he learned to turn that itself into a spiritual practice. Again, intentionality in what we do, in anything we do, the walks we do. By the way, as a spiritual director, my joke is I spent a few $1,000s to learn that all you need to do as a spiritual director is sit with somebody, ask them the question, where do you see God in your life? And then just let them talk. And that's all you really needed to know, because that's one of the best questions we can always be asking ourselves and others. Where do I see God in this? That intentionality. So very good. Lisa, did you have anything you wanted to share, or Bruce?
There we go. I'm muted. Sorry.
That's okay.
One of the things I started doing recently, during Lent specifically, was on Wednesday mornings, I would do a Facebook Live where I'd read a devotional and we'd pray together. And it was great because I even did it when I had gone away for a couple weeks, and I even did it when I was away, and it like from wherever I was. So it was just a commitment to those messages every week. And I had a lot of people that were really not, I had some people that were very, you know, they enjoyed it. So I think I might carry that on for a while, because it forces me too. I would do it before I left for my other job, and it kind of centered my mind for the day. So just anything that is like a commitment, like you said, that is something that you can incorporate every week. One of the things I wanted to say, Monica, during the lockdown part of the pandemic, and I live in the country, and I think this is from one of your writings, buddy, but I'm not sure. I would go on a walk and I would let God speak to me in the sense that I would stop and listen to things that I wouldn't typically hear, like the sound of the wind going through a branch of a tree. And then I would, one day I had a snake, a little garter snake, because I was walking with railroad tracks in my house. He surprised me and I surprised him. And then when I'd get back from my walk, I would write about it. I'd write about the things that I noticed, and on a path that I walked many, many, many times. But today I noticed this pine tree is a little shorter than that one, or a little greener than this one. And it's a meditation, really. And so I want to start doing that more often. So thank you for reminding me how healthy that is.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's good. Well, yeah, everybody's mentioning several the importance of walking and being in nature. And the other thing is walking and just, like as you said, just listening, turning off the phones. You know, as a runner, I see so many people with their headphones, and that's fine. That's not my shtick. I like to hear the birds singing, you know, and the dogs barking and the neighbors yelling or whatever. Yeah. So that's good. Unplugging. Bruce, did you say you didn't have something you're going to?
No, what do I do? Every morning I have my regular devotion period, which involves praying, reading the scripture, looking at my calendar, and then doing some academic reading. That's one of the things. Another is trying to stay active in community activities. So those are two things that help me connect.
That's really great. You know, and the one thing, you know, you mentioned some of the standards, you know, the Bible reading, and we've mentioned Mike mentioned journaling and prayer. We've mentioned meditation. Those are some of your kind of hallmark go-to beginning spots, right? But it's interesting. The academic reading is really important for nurturing of our souls. I find I need that. It nurtures my mind and my soul, you know, and if I'm not putting in, I don't have anything to put out either. So there's definitely a spiritual, I loved Gustavo Gutierrez, the Latin American liberation theologian, his book, We Drink from Our Own Wells. Always loved that. And how deeply his justice work was really rooted in his spirituality and his prayer, but also just the idea that we got to fill up that well or we run dry. We do. Well, you know, you've all mentioned several of the ones I like to do too. And, you know, every morning my thing is to wake up and light some candles in the dark in my living room, and I like to begin. And we're gonna, in a moment, we're gonna go here because I don't want this to cut out in the middle of what I'm gonna do. Just a very quick meditation moment. But I like to spend about 5 minutes of just total silence and unplugging and letting go. And then, yeah, I have some devotional books I use and some scripture that I'll read. And I like to have different books. One of the books, 2 of them that are assisting me right now in that time. One is called Conversations with God. It's 2 centuries of prayers by African Americans. And it's been really, I'm just about done with that. I started that in January. And it's wonderful, just spirituality, the African American community. And another little series, this one is Draw Ever Closer, Henry Nouwen, and just some daily readings. So I really encourage that stimulation of even those few minutes that it might be to read and ponder someone else's connection with God to nurture your own. It's really, really helpful. And then, of course, the journals. And I'm sitting here. This is my very colorful journal right now. I love. It's my number 98 journal that I started back in seminary, and here I am now retired, and still, it's been a lot. What I want to show you is, let me just share on the screen here. I think this is the right one. It doesn't look right. This one looks right. Here we go. And the book I'm writing right now, I've got 37 of these written up, but I look at the practices. If I were to say, what's one word that might encapsulate the meaning of practices to me, the word is opening. Opening. What the practices do is open me, and you can see the 3 categories: opening to God, opening to others, opening to the world. And what I've listed are, and some of these could go in any of the other columns, but just take a look right now there. And if opening to God, obviously prayer, solitude, silence, etc. Opening to others, worship, communion, baptism, testimony, faith sharing, singing, and on and goes. Opening to the world, mission, justice, solidarity with the poor, and advocacy, contemplative eating. And Micah, that might go to the vegetables, right? The fresh vegetables. Exactly. Just get a kind of picture that. Again, I can send this to you also, just so you can have more time to think about it. And I've got 37 of them written up. And if you want, just let me know in the email you'd like the spiritual practices. And then once I finish, I can then send you the rest of them. Hopefully now that I'm retired, I'll have some time to do that. As you look at that, just quickly, any of those just speak to you, just name any that might say, that have hit you, of something you might want to explore in your life, if you have any of those that you hadn't thought about maybe?
My first scanning of them is I am very heavy on the right side. I might say almost every single one on the opening to the world is either a weekly part of my life or pretty frequently, maybe even daily on some of these. So that's interesting to note. That's kind of where I'm gravitated toward right now in my life.
Had you been thinking of those things as spiritual practices before?
No. So, I was brought up in a very evangelical Southern Baptist tradition, pastor's kid, and was very, very well versed on the left side there.
Yeah.
Like you said, the hallmark kind of traditional idea of what prayer was. It was taking time to, close your eyes and pray directly to God, a lot of times using scripture and things like the Lord's Prayer to guide that time. A lot of scripture memory, very much using that word discipline was very frequent in my childhood in religious practice. So I've kind of been on this journey out of that tradition and then through seminary, and really becoming more aware of letting my life become a living prayer. That, taking a walk in my neighborhood can be a way that I talk to God about where I'm at with my body, my soul. You know, I really appreciated what you mentioned about using the Jewish traditional understanding that everything is more connected. And I feel like that's been a missing link that I've been working on healing in my life.
Yeah, and that's powerful. As you say that, I'm looking at it thinking, yeah, a lot. I grew up in the evangelical tradition, Houghton College too, and all that. And yeah, a lot of the left side resonates a lot with both evangelical and the Catholic spirituality world. And the middle, a lot of those really connect a lot with mainline church Christianity. And then the right side, a lot more of the more radical or progressive sort of Christianity. And I think what's interesting is maybe looking at these as a way of saying, are there some aspects in the other categories I have not utilized that I might want to work on a bit, and to just develop that overall balance. But at the same time, what I'm getting at is not to denigrate all of those wonderful spiritual practices on the right side. They may be our avenues to connecting with God, because here's another little aspect, and we won't get into it, but introverts and extroverts have very different entrances and experiences of the spiritual life. A lot of introverts have a lot better time on the left side and a lot of extroverts on the right side, right? And I'm an extrovert. I had to really develop the left side. Anybody else really quickly? Anything else that hit you with these?
For me, it was contemplative eating. I'd never heard of it. I just looked it up. I already subscribed to something. It sounds fantastic.
Which one was that? I'm sorry. Which one was that?
Contemplative eating.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm excited to learn more about that. And then the other one, simplicity, just jumps right out at me. So I think God is asking me to study upon those two things right now.
Good. And I've written about those I'm writing about those in that book, so I can send it. And by the way, the book I wrote, they're just one page on all of these to make it super straightforward, simple, and something you can just practice. It's not like they're not dissertations on all these things. They're very simple. So anybody else before I shift? Okay. There's a lot of information just really fast, obviously, but I wanted to show you one thing here before we do this. And that is, let's see if I've got the right one. Yeah. One of the things I've learned from the monks over the years, and a lot of especially Catholic writings, is one of the ways some people don't like the word balance. They find that they don't like it. I like the word balance. For me, it makes a lot of sense. So whatever you want to call it, that's fine. Integrated life, whatever. But the Latin and the English, one thing that I've really worked on for the last few years, not always really well, but is that each of my days in some way are a balance of ora et labora, lectio et quies. Pray and work, reading and rest, so that there's prayer involved in my life and there's work in my life. There's reading. That goes back to Bruce, right? Reading and rest to make sure that I'm replenishing and renewing my life. And I just put this out to you as something to ponder and to ask about your life. How balanced is my life? This itself is a bit of an essence, I would say, of the spiritual practice of incorporating a way that recognizes the wholeness of our lives in a way of living in relationship with God, ourselves, and others. And so something to ponder a bit. And I think what I would say as we go to this last little piece is if I were to say there was one spiritual practice that really has transformed my life, it's Sabbath keeping. As a pastor, I just never practiced Sabbath keeping. I worked on Sunday and I really didn't take many days off or anything. And I was burning out. And I read a little book from Alban Institute about, I don't even remember what it was. It was about clergy care. That was the name of it. And it raised the fact that I was not doing very well and my stress level was really high. Anyway, the long and short, what came out of that study process was I needed to practice Sabbath keeping, of really unplugging, coming back to Monica, from the phone, from the and from Bruce, the calendar, one day where I really unplug from everything. And I go on those walks and I eat contemplatively. I just eat slowly. Then I pray. If you're married or in a significant relationship, you spend time with each other if you can. For me, it was Mondays. And I would just have to say that goes beyond, as I write in my book on the practices, it goes beyond one day a week. What I'm really getting at is a Sabbath lifestyle. And what I just want to say really simply to end this little piece is, in the Hebrew for when it says, and on the seventh day, God rested, literally means God caught God's breath. It's to catch your breath. And I think that the times daily and weekly and monthly and periodically and quarterly and yearly, that we can build a Sabbath lifestyle that builds the sense of our connection with God, and the practices and the spiritual practices that nurture us, body, mind, and soul, and all of that, is really developing a Sabbath lifestyle. And I think it's the heart of the relationship with God, going back to the commandment. Of all the commandments, it's the one that Moses said most about, was keeping the Sabbath. Must have been a reason. We need that rest and that time and that space to connect with God and our better selves. And so what I'd like to do, because I know they're going to cut us off at some point. Maybe I have a breakout room thing. Let's see what it's saying. I don't know. No, I think it doesn't.
Says we have 8 minutes.
8 minutes. Perfect. Thank you. I missed that. So I want to take just 5 minutes really quickly for us just to catch our breath. Okay. Because I think when I said that Sabbath keeping is really kind of the heart of my spiritual practice, I'd have to say that's maybe the macrocosm. The microcosm is getting still and quiet, letting go and breathing and relaxing. And so what I want to do is just take no more than 5 minutes for us just to get really quiet right now, to get comfortable in our seats, and to trust the chair to hold us up. We do that, but sometimes we stay tense as if the chair is going to fall out from underneath us and we're going to hit the floor. No, just spend a moment from head to toe, relaxing, letting go of the tension in your head, your forehead, your eyebrows, your mouth, your ears. Let the tension go. Down through your neck. You can move your neck around in circles if that helps, to just let that tension go. Down through your shoulders, lift them, drop them. Let the tension go. Down through your arms, your hands, your fingers, your back, your torso, your hips, down through your buttocks and your thighs, your knees, your calves, your ankles, your feet and toes. Just let the tension go. That's Joan Borisenko's first part of her book. Relaxing is really critical. And as you relax and rest, just breathe. And maybe you haven't paid attention to it if you're a singer and been in choirs or music singing lessons. You've learned to breathe from the diaphragm. Put your hand on your belly. When you breathe in, your belly should get bigger. When you breathe out, your belly gets smaller. Breathe in, belly gets bigger, like a balloon. Breathe out, your belly gets smaller. Just practice that for a moment. And then you can take your hand off your belly when you feel you got it. It's not chest breathing, it's deep abdominal breathing. And it's what gives us power, for speaking in public and singing, but also is good resting breathing. And so with that, relax and breathe. Let go. The things that are on your mind and your spirit. And now very simply, add to your relaxing and breathing a sacred word, just one word. Just choose it. Don't go through a whole list trying to figure out what it is. It might be simple as God, Spirit, Jesus, love, hope, faith, peace, whatever. A sacred word, choose it. And just breathe it in rhythm with your breathing. Breathe that word. And we're just going to do that for a minute. I'll time it so you don't have to worry about it. For this moment of relaxation and breathing and space and time, connection with you, oh God, we give you thanks. Amen. Even in those couple minutes, did you find a little peace? Yeah, it doesn't take much, does it? It really doesn't. I try every morning to make sure, I always make sure I have at least 5 minutes, and I try not to watch the clock, just let it go and be there. I really want to encourage you. It's in my prayer book. I talk about the other book that I've done on centering on prayer as a practice. I really tried to, a lot of things I've done have really built around this place of meditation, of space, of prayer. And I highly recommend that you weave this into your days. It can be at work. You spin your chair around for 5 minutes and just breathe and let go. It can be driving, eyes wide open, obviously, but letting go. When I drove 20 minutes to First Presbyterian Church, 25 for 20 years, and I spent a good bit of that Sunday mornings doing just this as preparation for worship. That I might be, the intentionality is, I'm not just sitting breathing. With intentionality, it's, I'm here to be present with you, God, who's present to me. And we begin to empty. I don't know, very interesting. What words? I chose empty. I needed to empty myself today. Anybody else have a word you used for that time?
Gratitude.
Okay. Anybody else want to share your word?
Enough. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
My word was enough, as in I am enough.
Good. Yeah. That's good. Yeah,
I was on a different planet. I used Ada, the name of my granddaughter.
Hey, no, that's good. That's great. That's sacred.
Yes, it is.
Absolutely. Laura, do you have one?
Permission. I often think I don't give myself permission to just take that time.
Love it. That's great. Well, we've got 50 seconds left, which is great, or 30 seconds, whatever it is. I can't read it. Thank you so much for coming. Again, send me an email if you want any of more of this stuff. And I'm glad to be, I'm also a spiritual director. If anybody needs one, I'm always available. I'm a lot more available right now to meet. I don't charge anything. If you want to give a donation, that's fine, but I don't care. So thank you all so much, and blessings to you. And I think she's going to, I guess we just go leave room. Is that right? Here it is. Close now. God bless you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye now.